All right, I'm going to call the September 6th meeting of the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness. Somebody's got their microphone.
You might have.
No, mine's on.
Jocelyn has her mic.
Pardon me?
Just turn your mic off, Jocelyn.
Okay, checking. No. Somebody in here. Mine's off. No, I hate this one. Can you tell?
I got that feeling.
I'm not. Have we figured it out?
At the conference center, Cheryl, it has been those things before. There's something, another mic or something on there.
Yeah, she's muted.
Not muted.
It should be muted on the side.
Yeah.
Just put your sound down.
Hillary, are you connected?
No.
Yeah, she's muted, but the sound's coming through.
Coming through hers, you turn the sound down.
It's coming through the webcam on the
There we go.
our main page of it.
No, it's not.
Cheryl, if you use your SMS, I'm sure it's.
I'm sure it's.
Okay, testing.
Yeah. Can you still hear us, Jocelyn?
So it's on here then?
Yeah, it was something on that side, but it wasn't muted.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when we had to do it for those surveys at a council meeting, there was an extra step that audio visual down there did on the actual laptops. That
This is an iPad,
an iPad that
the new ones.
because it was causing it.
See, the mic was muted, but it's still, the speaker was not muted, so the sound's coming through.
Yeah,
And then
it's
echoing
still
back
kind of.
You know what, I'm gonna join without audio, see if that works.
Yeah.
Give that a try, yeah.
Hang on.
Apologies, everyone. We're just having
That's why I hate
technical
this
issues. It is supposed to be getting an update.
And it's still picking your voice up, what you're saying.
See, I don't, it's not on my calendar.
Yes, so it was just because Cheryl was also logged in on Zoom on her iPad that it was causing that
Can you
feedback.
try that Zoom?
No, because I need to Zoom link, but it didn't show up on my calendar. See, I have to put on my calendar.
My husband
I'm
updated
really
it.
not good with them. I've just been in enough of these situations where there's technical
I can't even
issues.
turn mine on now.
Oh, no.
But it showed up, it showed up, as I had.
There are two
That's I'm working on
But it showed up,
process.
I needed it in 10 minutes, it showed up.
AKA Max Curiosa. So we're workshopping. It's only been 2
Someone
days.
But I thought it showed up on here, up here.
So we'll see.
It's like, it's just, it never been showing up on my track. I never felt it was switched on. Like I don't get the ability to accept or decline, I only get over it. Do I need to go on Zoom?
Oh, yeah. Probably it was probably in this calendar, maybe over here.
No, I think you can be seen on the other camera, Cheryl.
Okay, so took me.
It was on the wrong.
I think it was out not his personal iPad. My name.
Yes.
Just wait.
So we're admitting Cheryl.
No, we don't.
Are we just already in the command center?
No, sorry, you take the sound, it wasn't supposed to. I'm not even gonna go on Zoom, just trick me off.
Or is the command center currently haunted?
So, Madam Chair,
Yes,
Richard Harlow has his hand up.
yeah, I know, he's just waiting to see if we've started.
Okay,
I heard him.
okay.
Just take me off, I don't need to be on Zoom. Okay, there we go. I think we're good to go now. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'm going to be calling the meeting, Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness, September 6th, 2023 to order. Introduction of late items, our clerk today is Ms. Gertie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for late items today from Ms. Wendy Ball, if we could add to the agenda, Inclusion BC and Self Advocates wanted her to pass on a few items, and if she was hoping to do so.
Could we please put that as 8C now?
Yes.
Now, be under other business, item C will be discussion on inclusive housing seminar.
And just another potential late item was to talk about our work plan. Where do you want to put that, Sheila?
We could do it as D, and some future meeting dates too, some tentative meeting dates to
So
go
D
with
and
that.
E,
Yeah.
or to get put
Oh,
it
it's
together?
kind of together, yeah,
Okay.
so just a new D.
Okay. Got it. Okay, could I please have an adoption of the agenda as amended? Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Eastmer, seconded by Tanya. All in favor? Motion carries.
Aye.
Richard, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, was wondering if I would be able to bring some feedback to like late items possibly.
What's your late item?
I received some feedback on the accessibility of Maffeo Sutton from the Clay Tree Society this past week.
Okay, we'll put that as E, so feedback on Maffeo Sutton. If we should be able to get to it. If not, we'll put you on the next one. And you're always free to send an email out to everybody, including Mr. Harding as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So we've done the adoption minutes, chair's report. We're gonna go around the table, sorry.
Did we adopt the agenda as amended?
Yes, we just have to vote.
Okay.
Go around for introductions. I'm Cheryl Armstrong, I'm the chair. Councillor Eastman is the co-chair, so City Council, that's me. Wendy, we'll start with you.
I'm Wendy Hall, I'm a parent, and I am the chair of Community Council. I'm also the provincial advisor for BC People First. I support people in the community that have a diverse ability, and my daughter Amanda keeps me very busy.
Thank you. John?
John Cowan, I'm the longest Nanaimo resident in the room.
Right on. Sean?
Sean Enns, I'm a vocational counselor and advocate with the Nanaimo Association for Community Living. I'm a parent of a child with multiple disabilities. I have a disability of ADHD and mental health disorders, and I do advocacy in the arts community around neurodivergence.
Great, thank you. Tanya?
Tanya Bursvich, I am a Nanaimo resident all my life, probably second longest resident, and I am a school trustee, and I've been born with spina bifida since birth.
Thank you. Hillary?
I'm Hillary Eastmuir, a counselor with the city, also on the design advisory panel, and yeah, very happy to be part of this committee.
Thank you. Tammy?
I'm Tammy Hirasawa. I'm a physiotherapist with the Nanaimo Child Development Center and also with the Japanese Canadian Society.
Nicole?
I'm Nicole Suhiana. I am an occupational therapist, Child Development Center with the school district, accessibility committee.
Thank you. Faye?
I'm Bacon Raid. I'm a sociology student and a mother and a person living with disabilities.
Thank you. Richard?
Hi everyone, I'm Richard Harlow. I'm a vision impaired member of the committee. So yeah, hi.
Going as I see on the screen. Jocelyn?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Maffin. I'm probably the newest Nanaimoite in the room. I moved here a little over 5 years ago. I was born with a tumor on my spinal cord, so I'm a paraplegic and I use a manual wheelchair. I'm the Associate Director of Spinal Cord Injury BC, where I represent the 12 to 15,000 odd people with similar disorders of paralysis, and including here in Nanaimo.
Thank you. And Alexandria?
I'm Alexandria Stewart, and I am a parent of a young adult with a neurodevelopmental disability and also the board member at Clay Tree Society.
Great, thank you. Do we want to do staff introductions, Ms. Curry, or just when they come along?
We'll do it when we come on.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah. So our first presentation will be the Rick Hansen Foundation Audit Review, to be introduced by Mr. Harding, who is our acting CAO, as well as our general managers of Parks and Recreation and Culture.
Thank you, Chair. We're pleased to bring this forward. It must have been over a year ago that the Rick Hansen Foundation reached out to us and pre-selected Nanaimo as a city to receive 3 free evaluations of facilities, as well as once we've gone through that, they would give us up to $82,000 towards improvement. And another aspect, which Mr. Bryson will come up and talk about in a minute, was also we could also work with them to get our staff trained up on how to do thorough, accessible evaluations of our facilities. And so we went through all that. We picked the 3 sites. So I just mentioned that we think this is the beginning of a longer-term relationship with the Rick Hansen Foundation and our evaluations. So it's just a start. But with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Bryson to come up. He's been working with them on the details and kind of go through each site. And what we thought was he'll start off what we actually did and maybe stop after each facility if there's some questions on each facility. So he'll go through the aquatic center and stop.
Richard, do you have a question or is that a leftover?
A leftover, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Bryson. Sorry about that. Just had to confirm. It's all up to you.
All to me.
I've got it on here. I can see.
There we go.
It's coming back.
Good
Mine that
afternoon.
one it's not, but I'll tell you.
Just turn that on.
It just turns on.
Don't worry about it.
So just for process, once he's finished this, I'll ask you to put your hands up and please wait to be acknowledged. And then we will do our questions after the first building assessment.
Yeah.
Or street, whichever.
If you press run, slideshow.
Let's see.
See, when you know why.
There we go.
I can probably advance it from here, can I, Jocelyn?
Yeah, you can use the arrows.
Perfect.
I will just be turning off my video because I'm bringing my monitor close to my face.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. Nice to be here. My name is Mike Bryson. I'm the manager of recreation facilities and custodial services with the city. And I'm going to be telling you a few things what happened with the Rick Hansen Foundation, some of the audits they've done for our facilities, and some of the opportunities we've been able to realize through that relationship. In January of 2023, the Rick Hansen Foundation approached the city and asked us if they could audit 3 of our facilities, as Richard said. So 3 sites were chosen, and they did a complete audit of those facilities. They took those audits and brought them back to us and allowed us to see what they came up with. The audit was based on holistic user experience of people with varying disabilities affecting mobility, vision issues, and hearing issues. They offered us up to $82,000 in total as a grant to modernize and bring our facilities up to a new standard. And they also allowed us some training dollars for our staff so we could become auditors and assess our own facilities. Doesn't seem to work, and there it goes. Sorry. This, I think, is the old one. Maybe not. So we had talks a bit about the training. So aside from the grant that they offered to the city for facilities, we offered some training opportunities. So we had 2 of our staff take a 10-week training session with Vancouver Community College on accessibility, and myself and our operations supervisor took that training. From that training, we both passed, and then now we can write exams with CSA, and from that we'll become full-fledged auditors. We can then go and audit any facilities that we have in the city, or any new facilities that we bring on board later on. So it's a very good asset to have within our own system. The rating system that they use for the audit, they have 2 different levels of certification. They have certification, which is up to 80%. That's just general certification. and then they have above 80% is considered gold. So they came in, the auditor came in, he was here for probably 4 days, went through the 3 facilities and went through them quite thoroughly. We had one of our staff stay with him, and it was a very good process to go through. It was interesting to see what they came up with. Yeah. So the first facility that they did was the Nanaimo Aquatic Facility Center, sorry. Showing up. So this facility came up with a 77% certification rate, so it was just 3% under gold, which was quite nice. It was good to see. Facility did very well. There was a lot of good things, there's a lot of improvements that we need to do to the facility, or we have opportunities to do those improvements, but overall the facility did quite well. Some of the things that they noticed that were done quite well at the facility, power operated doors, exterior pathways were located on all sides for easy accessibility. There was sufficiently, interior lighting, which we just had redone. We just upgraded everything last year, and we just, this year, right now during shutdown, we're completing the rest of the facility, so it has all new LED lighting. It has, the parking spaces are conveniently located for accessible parking. The pool is accessible for folks that need, that have mobility issues. For accessing the pool, we have 0 depth. We also have harnesses for helping people get into the pool. And we have a very good universal shower system for our setup. Of course, there's areas of improvement. So some of the areas that they noted that we can improve on, additional markings on the glazed doors for visual impairments, installing additional directional signage so people can see the signage. A lot of the signage we have is wall mounted, so instead we've laid signage, that type of thing. Consider installing braille, raised text and symbols on the doors and lamequid so people can identify which room they're going into. Consider visual fire alarms so that somebody who has a hearing impairment would be able to see a fire alarm strobe go off and they would know there's an emergency and they'd evacuate the facility. So that's some of the things. There's a few others as well, but the audit was, like I say, very extensive. They went through, they took their time. It was good to see.
Okay, we're just going to stop and see, is there any questions on the aquatic center? Wendy?
One of the things that a friend of mine would like to do is go down the slides. This is someone who uses a wheelchair. She's very adventuresome. She's already jumped out of airplanes. So is there a possibility for that to happen?
To have someone go to the top of the slide with mobility issues, it would be difficult with the setup we have right now because it is based on stairs. I mean, I'm not sure what else we could do other than it would have to be some kind of a lift or elevator.
Right.
I mean, anything, I mean, we could look at something, there may be something out there that would take them up. It might not be to the top of the slide, maybe it's a halfway point or something like that, where they would still have that experience.
Yeah.
It's certainly worth looking into.
And the second thing was, in the washrooms, have you considered putting in change rooms for adults? Change tables for adults?
We have, that was actually one of the recommendations that they had. So, I mean, that all kind of comes down to space. A lot of the washrooms were built without that in mind. So it becomes where do you put these types of things? But they are important. They were looked at.
Thank you.
So I have Bay and then Tammy, but I saw Mr.
Just want to make one movement. I think we've added the audits to your package. I believe they're all 3 audits are in there. So in case you want to go through the details, they should all be on there.
They're a little more complete.
Bay and then Tammy?
Yeah, so I noticed there was a lot of discussion about the accessible parking and how great the pathways are from there. However, the accessible pathways from the bus stop to the center are an issue. Currently there's a rather outdated one. It has 2 lamp posts and a garbage can right in the path.
Okay.
It has a few different crosswalks and it isn't so good the way it's running through the parking lot.
Well, it's good to know. The easy one on that is definitely move the garbage can and get that out of the way. And then look at, maybe is it a curb that's the issue or is it just there's obstacles in the way?
There's obstacles. So there's 2 large lamp posts.
Okay.
And
that's from the bus stop?
Yeah.
So Bay, could I ask you to put that to an email as well so that we've got a written record of it when you get a chance?
Yeah,
and if you just send it to the committee. then it will go to our staff as well, so. Mr. Hardy?
Yeah, I just want to say that's a really good point, because we've looked at the building itself, but not necessarily all the, from the road in, so that's a good point. We need to, from these audits, we know we need to keep going outwards and find other things, so that's a great addition.
No, it's great. This is what we
Particularly
want
from the bus stop.
from this committee, to really help us focus on stuff that we don't think about, right? Tammy?
So in the universal change room, the one area that is set up with the lift for people to help, like caregivers to help someone get from the wheelchair changed and with a shower, the size of the room is really small, so it's hard to have like a caregiver, a wheelchair, and like the change area in there. And then the change table itself is an issue in terms of it breaks all the time, and they've tried different trolleys and all kinds of stuff in there. And yeah, so I think that the space in there is a challenge. Like it's hard to maneuver with the door going in, and there's a lot of issues with that room.
I agree.
That area.
I agree. The table has been addressed. We've actually purchased a very expensive table, a very good one, and it's motorized. So you can actually put someone up to a complete standing position and lower them right down to a laying position. It's quite nice. We purchased that, and after the shutdown, it will be installed.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't do much for the size of the room, of course. That's unfortunate, but it makes it a little easier experience once you're in there. So that should help quite a bit. I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned about the lamppost and that in the way. And it's interesting because when I took this training, I didn't realize those kinds of issues. I didn't see it from that lens on how much of an impact that has. But as we went through the training, because a large part of it was people navigating, we used the Vancouver, or the community college as our template, and how hard it is for people to actually get around campus with those kinds of obstacles in place. So it was a real eye-opener for myself and the fellow that took the training with me, so it was good to go through that. A lot of things we took from that course that will make me look at the facility completely different, for sure.
Nicole?
So on that topic, I think that I've looked at the access with my daughter, who's doing a youth accessibility grant with through the federal government, and we were looking at that the bus transportation. It's because it's in front of the school. And then you have to traverse school district property to access, and it's NDSS property, I think, is where the issues lie. Yeah. So it's going to be a partnership with the school district in order to resolve those issues. And then when you're talking about the campus of a campus like Vancouver Community and our sports district being a campus and accessible parking fit between Nick, the Soroxman fields, the new all-weather fields, and the NAC, like it kind of needs to be looked at as a complex, right? And they've upgraded the crosswalk between Nick and NAC, but you cannot bring a wheelchair up to the wave-operated lights. Like you cannot get close enough because of the concrete and the sloping. And so when we're talking about grounds around our facilities, and I realize Rick Hansen doesn't look at that to the same extent, I think if we see that as a campus, that needs to be looked at as a whole package, not just NAC or the Nick or the ball fields. It's all sort of.
So the stadium area, that's what we refer to it as. So we should be looking at it as a whole package, not, I know right now that the plan was just to look at the tree for now. These are great suggestions for future.
Yeah, because our parking is integrated, our transportation is integrated.
Yes, if I could, Chair, just on that. So yeah, when we were looking at the stadium district, and we do include all those. This, of course, was starting that facility. But it's one, we have a number of projects coming up we'd like to bring back to the community. Quinnistook, we've just got the quote or the package to do our new bleachers and press box for the Quinnistook, and so that will go through a design process and we'll bring that back. But then that whole integration, and even how we integrate into VIU parking, because we'll need that for some of the events we're having. So we're having some, it's really taken off as a district, and our events are getting bigger and bigger, so all that connectivity is going to be important.
So I just have a question for Mr. Bryson. So now that you and your fellow cohort have got this training, do you look at all of our city plans that are coming up then to make sure that they...
We have that opportunity, and it would make sense if, I just got notice yesterday that I'm able to go and write my exam. So once I write the exam for CSA, then I become an auditor, so through Rick Hansen Foundation. And then I'm able to audit facilities that are existing or anything new that's coming.
That's
and
awesome.
as well Mike Brooks.
So then we should make sure our recommendations go direct to you as well.
Yes, and I think as we work on, maybe in October, we do our work plan together.
Okay.
Maybe we prioritize some facilities
Okay,
as a
perfect.
committee. And because we have, I think, 200 buildings.
Yeah.
Like some are little pump houses, but I think we've got a lot, so.
Okay, I don't see anybody on the screen with questions, so we'll go to our next area.
I just
Sorry,
had one.
sorry,
So I understand, that's okay. I understand that the Rick Hansen Foundation has specific accessibility measures that you highlighted before. Of course, there are additional measures in the grand scheme of accessibility related to promote access for people with intellectual, developmental, and neurodevelopmental disabilities. And I wonder if that's part of something that the city or council is looking to tail off of this. So once they've had a look at these measures, is there plans to continue to increase accessibility in other areas for other disabled populations?
I think I'll go to Mr. Harding to answer that one. I'll save you.
Again, I think this is one of the reasons council has struck this committee was to help us do those kinds of things. I think particularly, we talk about accessibility, but I think you're crossing into in that inclusivity side of things, and I think that's where we know we're going to do a lot more work on the inclusivity side. So a lot of the accessibility issues, and that also then maybe some of those will blend into.
So Sean, can I ask you to raise that when we bring up our work plans too, because I think that's really important, because we do have a tendency to focus just on wheelchairs and walkers and stuff, so I think that'd be great to put it in our work plans as an option.
Yeah.
So, because I might forget, so I'll ask you not to forget.
Oh, I won't.
Okay, are we good now, I think? Seeing no further questions, we'll go on to our next one, thank you.
Last thing about training I'll mention is part of the whole program we're doing with Rick Hansen is they've offered free training to all city staff. We have a session coming up on the 11th of September. It's all through Zoom, and it's one of their trainers from Rick Hansen Foundation. We'll have probably 60 or 70 staff taking this. We could do more. This is what we're doing in the first shot. And all it is to help our staff gain awareness and start looking at things, like I said, like I have, a little bit more, so that they become more aware of what their workplace and their surroundings and how we can better serve customers and people that are using facilities. So I think
Becoming aware is the first step.
Yeah. The next one, Frank Crane Arena. Frank Crane Arena actually hit a 74%, according to the auditor, which was quite good. It's an old building, but it's been well maintained, and I think that's what the auditor said and what I know of. Facilities are maintained as well as we can, and I think their staff do a great job of making sure that they're clean, they're accessible, and so it's good. So some of the areas of success that the auditor found at Frank Crane Arena: power operated doors at the main entrance. The exterior pathways are located on all sides of the facility, providing sufficient width, and exterior seating is available. It has a very accessible lobby. The interior lighting provides consistent illumination, and all of our facilities we're in the process of, for all kinds of reasons, of replacing with LED, which just brings the whole illumination thing up. It makes it a lot easier to walk around, get through the facility. Accessible drop-off and pickup lane with transit service designation, and accessible exterior directional signage, including path diagram. So that's the things that we did well, and some of the challenges are some of the areas that they saw that we could improve upon. Oh, sorry. Catch up with myself. Accessible parking stalls was one, including markings for safe pedestrian route to the facility. We have them, but they need to be upgraded, need to be maintained a bit. Install the color contrasting slip resistant strips on the exterior and interior ramp landing transitions. Additional directional signage in the reception area. Installing edge protection, the ramp leading to the accessible seating area. Directional signage in the lobby reception area to improve wayfinding to all spaces. And again, that goes to that blade wayfinding rather than flat on the wall. And consider installing braille or raised text on our symbols on the lamp so people can identify which room they're walking into. Any questions on Frank Crane?
I just wanted to say it's really interesting when you talk about the color contrasted slip resistant slips that Richard Harlow, who's on our committee, brought that up about 2 years ago, Richard? The issues with that? And you brought that up, that the colors would be so important.
would just say, it's nice to see the reference to the parking stalls. Like I know even for me, the parking and the ramps and the feeling safe on those ramps, really good to see. The other one I would wonder about is they didn't say anything about putting, are there already, it could be a while since I've been to Frank Crane, safety buttons in the stalls and the washrooms for the accessible washroom?
No, that did come up as in all of our facilities. Make sure that we had call buttons inside the washrooms themselves. They're quite accessible as far as opening doors, buttons to open doors and that type of thing, but yeah, the emergency call buttons.
Yeah,
So
but
that's
if
one
you
of the things
fall
we
or
look
if you get, because what happened to me one time is I fixed it, I got out, but the door got stuck and I couldn't get it to open and I'm like, I'm trapped in the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any questions on Zoom. See no further questions. Next one.
Okay, Bowen was the last facility that they did. It achieved a 68% accessibility rating, a little lower than the others. A little different facility, it's a very busy facility. It's always on the go, but did get a little bit of a lower score. So some of the areas of success of Bowen Complex: power operated doors for easy access to and from the facility. Exterior pathways located on all sides of the facility with sufficient ways of getting around. Very accessible lobby. We just upgraded the lighting in there last Christmas, I think it was. And then accessible parking spaces on both sides of the facility. So that was our success stories. Areas of improvement. Installing edging directional signage, improved wayfinding for everyone. It needs it more than the other facilities actually. Tactile attention indicators at top and interior exterior staircases to alert those with vision issues. Installing additional directional signage at reception area and adjacent hallways. Handrails and seating areas on the long hallways. We would, replacing doorknobs type handles with lever type handles. Big one. And again, visual alarms so that folks with hearing impairment will know that there's a problem with the complex.
Questions? Sean?
Are they auditing just the buildings at Bowen Park, or are they auditing all the recreational areas?
They only did the facility itself.
Okay.
They didn't do the swimming pool and they didn't do the lawn bowling center.
Right, or the frisbee golf or the various areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just around the facility itself.
Is that something that once you've gone through this certification that you would plan on doing, is expanding the scope to all the recreational areas in Bowen Park?
I think we would probably, as priorities, whatever that priority list is, identify each of our facilities.
Great.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Harding?
Yeah, I think on that one, it'll be the difference between those buildings, which we focus on, to that open. I think you're thinking about the open spaces. Like Mathail Sutton open space, which may come up later on today. Those larger areas, like Bevan's 160 acres, Bowen's 130 acres. So how do you look at those? So again, maybe we prioritize that as a group, some of the things we would look at. And did your training look at the outside? Or so you can look at walkways?
Parks, trails. Yeah, covered all that as well.
So on this, because we've got now 3 that are done, how are we will that priority be done by your department or will it come to council?
Well, I think it's one that we could come back to in the work plan and talk about some of our key buildings and maybe,
Okay.
at least we could come up with our priority, maybe the committee could look at that and maybe come up with that.
Because I just think about Bowen because that's where most of our seniors are at and it seems to me that that's got the most issues for those with mobility issues, so that's just why I asked the question.
One thing I must say is about Bowen Park, that walkway that you did like a couple of years away is amazing. That is.
The new ones with the new lights on it?
Yeah, so that is.
With the new lights?
Yeah, that is really good, yeah. So.
We actually used that as one of our case studies for the class we were in, and it was very well received by the other folks in the class, so yeah, it was something proud of.
All right, I'm not seeing any. Richard?
Hi, sorry, I raised my hand, but yeah, I would say that from this assessment, I also would say that it sounds like Bowen needs the most attention out of the 3, especially because like there's a lot of community groups. I know that there's a blind lawn bowling league that actually goes to that facility too and uses it every week. So like that might be appropriate to be able to speak to some of these groups that actually use the facilities to see what sort of areas they have found issues or struggles with. So
Thank you. Jocelyn?
Thanks. One of my considerations here is I'm just curious what standard they used for accessible parking. And I confess I don't know this building except for I think I voted in it once. But the accessible parking pictured on the slide, I don't think is van accessible at all. And that is increasingly the format of accessible vehicle that a lot of people with mobility devices are using. And there's no access aisles for side deploying lifts. So, I mean, that I see there is one, it looks like there might be one aisle. It's kind of hard to see, but that's certainly, you've heard me raise the issue of accessible parking so many times. So apologies, but I think whenever you're considering upgrades for accessibility, it's really important to consider those, like updating the accessibility of your accessible parking so that there are more van accessible spaces.
Thank you. It's a good point because cars are also now on average 2 to 3 inches wider than they used to be, and we don't take that into account with our parking anymore.
And I would add to that, just for me, and I know this was on the building, but I'm thinking about outdoors. Like Bowen Park is one of the few places that I can't go by myself. If I'm gonna be outside, there's no point in me trying to go by myself because I'm not getting anywhere on my own in the wheelchair. Like for example, I went to a picnic at the picnic shelters. I can't do any of those, either of those ramps. They're too steep going down, too steep going up. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So that will be another issue for our work plans when they come up. We can talk about outside spaces, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, seeing no further questions?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
He's not done.
Yeah, one more to go.
He's got his next steps.
Next steps.
Something we like to see.
So next steps, as Richard said, the Rick Hansen Foundation has provided us with a grant, which we were successful in getting $82,000 to upgrade our facilities, these 3 facilities, ones that were audited. Today we committed to spending $24,000. We had to come up with a list of things out of the audit that we wanted to achieve right away. Some of the things that we did were, like I mentioned before, the highly more visible wayfinding signage, upgrades to our alarms so they have a visual strobe light on them, and mobility assist, which we found we're lacking in a lot of our facilities. So mobility assist, especially in our washrooms, down hallways, that type of thing. So a lot of, so we actually have those set and they're in play. We'll be putting a lot of new equipment into the facilities as it sits. And we still, of course, we still have the rest of the money that we can utilize as we want. And the last thing I want to mention is, in talking about parking, Nat, we've made some changes to our lobby and how foot traffic comes into the facility, and we wanted to make sure there was enough accessible parking for folks outside of the center itself. So all the parallel parking along the meridian facing the front doors of Nat are now accessible parking. So, you know, if you have a wheelchair access at the side of your van or whatever and you want to come out, you would be able to with those parking stalls. So there's a big help. So
Hear that, Jocelyn?
All that highlighted area in red is all now.
Thumbs up.
I think it's 5 or 6 that we have in there, in addition to the other ones that we already have. We didn't take any away, we just added.
That's great. Any further questions before we move on? John?
Can I just make a comment? When I was on the Bevan Park Recreation Commission when it was owned by the Regional District and John Furlong was the manager. And I must say, I've watched it and I think the city has done a very good job of looking after that place.
Thank you, appreciate that. That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
That's great. Thanks for the good work, and I know that we continue good work.
Lots more to come.
Housing needs report, I see it's Mr. Lindsay, but I'm assuming it's going to be Mr. Hardy.
Well, we've got, actually what we're gonna do is, you'll see it's kind of all things housing now. So we have 4 reports, and they kind of all interrelate. So Lisa Brinkman, Manager of Community Planning, is going to kind of do an overall intro, and then you'll see some keen, eager presenters in the back that will come up and do each of those reports. So Lisa, if you want to do the overall, that'd be great.
Richard, is your hand still a holdover?
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay. I do it all the time. Ms. Brinkman?
Hi everyone, my name is Lisa Brinkman, Manager of Community Planning. And we received direction from Council late in 2022 about a range of housing initiatives to do in the city to improve affordable housing and attainability for housing. And so today we're presenting 4 of those initiatives. And we had presented them to Council in June and got direction to proceed with the community consultation. And so the month of September is getting public input on these 4 initiatives. And they are related to adaptable housing, so finding ways to increase adaptable housing in the city, finding ways to increase family-friendly, attainable family-friendly housing in the city, finding ways to increase our secondary suites and coach houses, which we're calling detached suites for this presentation, and also increasing infill in existing neighborhoods, so townhouses and 4plexes and 3plexes. So that's the range of the 4 initiatives we'll be presenting to you. We'll also be presenting, Kasia will present the housing needs report, which was completed. So just wanted to let you know though that September is about getting input on these initiatives. So we're presenting our ideas to you, but really looking for your input. And there's a website with the information, and also there's a survey that you can complete as well. And there's an open house next week, so there's various ways. So today is just about digesting the information and processing it, no worries. You'll have opportunities to provide input throughout the month of September.
Ms. Vega? And again, as the other one, we'll wait until the presentation is done, and then I'll ask you to raise your hands, and we will take questions.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kasia Began, and I work in the Community Planning Department with Lisa Brinkman. And so we look at the long-term vision for Nanaimo. And today I'm here to provide you an overview summary of our housing needs report. So I press enter on this. Oh, there we go. So what is a housing needs report? Well, it provides a snapshot of the health of our housing market right now. Oh, skip forward, apologies. So it identifies population challenges to afford housing in the local market, the housing supply gaps, and other housing issues. It also provides the purpose of fulfilling the provincial legislation. So the province is requiring that every 5 years, every regional district and local government complete a housing needs report. And it provides an assessment of current and future housing needs, which is what we'll be talking about today. Informs plans and initiatives that we're currently working on, which are the 4 initiatives we are talking about today as well, and guides municipal actions and evaluates impacts over time. It's a really great tool for local governments. So here we have a housing network, which is a concept used to describe the broad range of housing options available to a range of households in different tenures to access affordable and appropriate housing. So as is a visual, I'll try to explain it. On the very top, we have what's called non-market and market housing. So under non-market, there's different types of housing that can fall under there. Safe houses, supportive housing, subsidized rental, and ownership of co-op. And the level of income assistance for government is higher and decreases as you go towards the market. Under the market component, the types of housing you can see is purpose-built rental, strata apartments, duplexes, as well as single-family homes. And it goes along this spectrum of income from very low, which is less than $14,999, all the way up to over $90,000 a year. And so generally, this housing network helps planners determine where the need is. So I'm going to go over the key findings of the report. So if there's any questions, please let me know. We've color-coded it so that green represents the state today, and the blue represents the needs of up to 2031. So right now, Nanaimo has a population of roughly 100,000 people, and expecting it to grow to 126,200 by 2031. So we're expecting quite a bit of growth. In terms of the dwelling units, on average between 2017 and 2022, we built 1,000 units. And the projection is that we need to build about 1,000 per year going forward. So we are currently on track to do that. We built 466 new units as of June of 2023. And in terms of the current state, 67% were owners and 33% were renters. Now we're talking about housing types built. So we had 51% built of single-family homes, 36% were apartments, and 5% were townhouses and roundhouses. And the housing needs report is telling us that we actually need to build less single-family homes because the demand is much greater for apartments and for townhouses and roundhouses. And that's generally because of the cost of single-family homes is becoming unattainable for many people. In terms of bedroom mix, we currently have 14% of one-bedrooms and studios built, 30% for 2 bedrooms, and 56% for 3 bedrooms. The housing need report is telling us that we actually need to increase the amount of single-family homes, single bedrooms built and studios to be 67%, 17% for bedrooms, and 60% for 3 bedrooms. Lisa Brinkman will speak to the family-friendly component of this. There is still a need for 3 bedrooms because many of those 3 bedrooms are being built in single-family homes. So we are proposing family-friendly housing policy to ensure that that is being built. Okay, now we can move on to affordability. So in terms of income increases, between 2001 and 2016, incomes increased by 21%. And from 2016 until 2021, they increased by 26%. But I do want to actually say that the expectation was that it was going to be less, but because of CERB that was offered because of COVID, that number is slightly inflated, and all municipalities have recognized that. But generally, people's incomes have not kept up with the cost of living, which many of us are very aware of when we go to the grocery store or buying homes or renting. In terms of house price increases, single-family homes went up 95%, apartments 104%, and townhouses and row houses 107%. So those are significantly large increases in our housing costs. In terms of rental price increase, a 1-bedroom unit is now $1,225. No. A 2-bedroom is $1,530, and a 3-bedroom is $1,600. And these are, I recognize, have gone up since this report was completed, but that was just a snapshot in time of the cost.
Does that come from CMHC, or are you actually doing the research on like Craigslist, Marketplace, and all that?
We're using CMHC.
Yeah, which is like about $500 or $600 under reality, just so you know. Because you can't get a 3-bedroom under $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
well, they're not looking at the market rate current, they're looking at
it's an average.
Everybody is paying, regardless how long they live there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous because it doesn't reflect what you have to pay to go get one.
It's true, because if you've been living in a unit for 20 years, you're paying significantly less than if you're looking for a home right now. So it takes an average, which is correct. So we are very aware of the challenge of cost of rental. In terms of income spent on shelter, over 23% of all households in 2021 spent more or equal or more than 30% of their income on shelter. And so the goal is to get that down to 0 by building more housing. Move on to the next slide. In terms of rentals, there was a 2.2% vacancy rate in 2022, which is quite low. Our goal is to get it between 3 to 5% by 2031. In terms of homelessness, the point in time count for 2023 was 517 people experiencing homelessness in Nanaimo, and our goal is to get that down to 0. And in terms of the housing market, we're looking at building 32% of our housing as non-market. So of those 1,000 units, we're aiming at 32% of those being non-market. So that's that original spectrum that we saw, and 56% are market housing. So really the non-market is the affordable component that we're really talking about now because the cost of housing has gone up so much. And that's the conclusion of the presentation.
Questions? Babe? Tanya?
Yeah, I noticed that 26% income increase there had an asterisk, and below it said there is a 26% of people who receive COVID benefits. Is that saying, like, when you're saying people's income increase, are you saying percentage of people had an increase or how much it increased?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, it's showing that people actually had greater incomes than they did because of the CERB that they were given. So once that CERB benefit runs out, their income is going to be reflective of that. But at the time of this assessment, it showed that people's incomes were higher because they received the CERB.
Right, okay. So the correlation of the 26% is just coincidental? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. It is.
Okay, we'll go to Tanya, Sean, Wendy, then Richard.
Thank you. And forgive me because anyone who works with me will tell you that numbers sometimes you have to tell me twice before I get it. That graph you showed, or the statistics you showed around 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, and the goals for the future. Can you go back to that slide so I can, because it's easier to ask
Do you mind just pulling it up for me?
That's it. Bedroom mix, that's it. So the goal would then be 67% 1 bedroom? It doesn't make, how are we gonna have families if we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a challenge that, having spoken to other jurisdictions, have also discovered. The Housing Needs report is looking at seniors and the greater need for seniors. And Lisa Brinkman, I don't know if you want to speak more to this because you had greater discussion with the Housing Needs report consultants, but in the report it does state that the increase for seniors housing is going to be significant, hence why the number is so high. But having spoken to other jurisdictions, we also recognize, on a daily basis, seeing the great need for family-friendly housing.
Well, I was actually going to say something else, and this is going to be controversial. If you let your community have too high a population of seniors, your community will die. Right. If we don't have people with children, we want people to be, I want to see people moving here with children, I don't care where they come from, and staying here, and so that we don't get overrun with seniors and we eventually have a ghost town when they all die because there's nobody to replace them.
So Tanya, this is just simply what the report is recommending,
okay.
But this is their statistics that they're using. But as Lisa Brinkman will present, we recognize the need for family-friendly housing, and so we are proposing policies that she'll get into
encourage families to come here.
So, and just under the mayor's leadership table, that was identified as an issue. And we learned at one of the reports that we're actually getting more 40-year-olds and families coming here now than seniors. It's actually flipped.
Good.
Next I have Sean.
The 32% non-market housing, is that based on, so you just mentioned that these numbers are based on the significant growth of seniors that need access to housing. So when you're talking about that 32% non-market housing, is that primarily earmarked for the number of seniors that will need to access non-market, or is that a mix of
It's a mix.
Seniors, unhomed, people with disabilities?
Along the whole spectrum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, now I have Wendy.
So taking all this into account, people with PWD, persons with disability, they get now $500 a month. Is that taken into account in this? Because, that's all they get for their housing out of with the money they get. My daughter still lives at home because she can't afford to go out.
I don't believe this report did take that into consideration. We'd have to look further into the average incomes and if that was considered, but the report doesn't go into that level of detail. That's a very good point, right?
Yeah, I think that's something for our work plan to address as well. Just read that. Next I have Richard, then Jocelyn, then I see Tanya again. Richard?
All right, you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Cool. All right, so yeah, I'm actually echoing that exact sentiment. Our disability assistance shelter rate only got increased for the first time in over 20 years, raised it up this June to $525 a month from previously $375. So taking that into consideration and the provincial government's lack of action over the last several years since 2006, I think it really needs to be emphasized within this report of how there's a huge discrepancy where essentially the current market value of a one-bedroom apartment is the equivalent of a person's disability assistance income in total.
Yeah, thank you,
Not
Richard.
just the shelter.
One of the things for that our jurisdictions are looking at is how they define affordable housing. And for that non-market component, they do based on your income. So it'd be 30% of your income is spent on shelter. So it would take into account what your income is based on what you receive from the government, right? So it would take account on the spectrum the various levels of income that individuals have and then provide non-market housing for them.
Jocelyn?
Kind of following up on that consideration, I'm just wondering whether these required housing needs reports reflect any information available about how big the need is for accessible housing in any part of that spectrum. Like if it's something you can find out at all, and if it is, do you know what that number is and what it needs to be?
It's a great point, Jocelyn. So this is the first time, I believe, that the province has mandated this. So quite a few jurisdictions are providing feedback on how to improve this next time around. So if the committee does have recommendations on information they'd like to see in this report, we recommend that you provide it to us, because then we can pass it on to the government and hopefully they can improve the process.
What if we
Hang on, Richard, it's not your turn, you're gonna have to wait. We have Tanya next, and then I'll go to you.
Well, it's sort of been said, but I'll just add that the issue of PWD and shelter funds are a little bit more complex, just in the sense that as somebody who's been in, or who is in non-market housing, BC housing, they actually they will gear it right to whatever the rate is. In fact, there was a raise one time that I didn't get because of it being BC housing. They said it's, anyway. But yeah, so there's a lot of, the real issue is we probably need more non-market housing for people with disabilities who are on PWD, and that would solve some of these problems, because it would be then geared to what the rate is for PWD.
Thank you. Richard?
I think it would be really worth noting a statistic in what percentage of the actual housing is both accessible and reaches the maximum shelter rate that people with disabilities are given, just because that should be a realistic number available to the public to prove the fact that we are not given enough PWD assistance for shelter.
Great, thank you. That's a point we can take further. Okay.
I just wanted to caution about the ratio of people who have the 30% of their income, like they're considered affordable. There are housing companies, rental corporations who are insisting they will not rent to you unless your income is 3 times the rental amount. Therefore, you need like $6,000.
There is also a move by the economists to go from 30% up to 40% for housing. It was just, these are all random numbers that have been chosen by economists, and now they're looking like Europe is over 60%, I think, and they're looking like we're actually half of what most of the world is. It's interesting to see where we'll be going. Okay, I don't see any further questions, so we'll next go to increasing adaptable housing in the NAMO, and that's Ms. Brinkman, please.
Everyone. The 4 initiatives, this is the first one. The city was looking at ways to increase adaptable housing in Nanaimo. And so this is direction from the Affordable Housing Strategy completed in 2018, and is also reflected in City Plan adopted in July 2022 for the city to do this. And so as you probably know, in 2017, a study was done in BC. Nearly 25% of BC's population aged 15 years and older identified as having a disability. And so, hence the importance of this project. And I'm just going to figure out how to move this forward. No? No, the arrow.
The arrow.
I was pushing. Oh, that arrow. No? Okay. Is there another arrow?
Or the space bar sometimes?
Oh, there we go. Okay, it's back. So adaptable housing, what is it? So it refers to housing with the potential to accommodate all community members regardless of their physical abilities. And there can be many different needs. I don't know why it's not moving. I'm trying to
pass it for you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with the BC Building Code and what they classify as an adaptable unit, which is actually different than what an accessible unit might be. So in accordance with the BC Building Code, an adaptable unit is a basic unit that allows for future conversion and individualized upgrades to meet the specific accessibility needs of a tenant, resident, or owner. So in the code, that would be, so this is a unit in an apartment building or in a multifamily building. So it would be a unit that has wider doorways, maneuvering room at dwelling unit entries and corridors, access to a main floor bathroom, reinforcement of walls for grab bars, accessible door handles, switches, and outlets. And so as part of this work, we did have an economist do a study and basically identified that to create an adaptable unit in a multi-family building actually doesn't increase the cost. So if the developer is planning that at the outset to have a certain number of adaptable units, it's very similar in cost to building, any other kind of unit. So that was good. But what is costly is the specific accessibility upgrades that the person may need, and that can be very individualized. And so BC Housing has a grant available for that. So, but it can be costly, and it's hard to measure, right, for a developer to build into a building, to know what the specific needs are. So that's why the BC Building Code has that basic standard to allow for upgrades. Oh, I'm going back. Okay, there we go. So, so the economists who did the housing study took a look at sort of what other municipalities have been doing to require adaptable units in multifamily buildings. So, City of New Westminster, Port Moody, Quitlam, I think were a few that were drawn from mostly in the Lower Mainland, where more multifamily buildings have been constructed in the last few years. And so based on that, what was recommended for the City of Nanaimo is to update the zoning bylaw. So wherever multifamily building is permitted, then of 10 or more units, if the development has 10 or more units, to require that 50% of those residential units meet the basic adaptable unit standard with the BC Building Code. So that's, we don't have, right now it's 0 are required, so that would be quite a significant increase. So for example, in 2022, just over 1,000 multifamily units were constructed. So if 50% of those were adaptable, we would have this year 500, approximately 500 more adaptable units. So that's what's being proposed. Oh, I'm going back again. Okay. Also, what's proposed is that in a seniors development, that 100% of the units meet the basic adaptable unit standard. And again, right now, there's no requirement for that. And there was one seniors development building permit issued last year. I think it was about 62 or 65 units, and 20 of them were adaptable. So that's sort of, voluntarily what we're seeing. But so this would change that. Also, in our zoning bylaw, when a multifamily building is allowed, we do have different ways that the developer can achieve additional density. We call it density bonusing. So there's different things they can do to get more density. So what we're proposing is, and right now we do say if 10% of the units are adaptable, they'll get additional density. But what we're saying now is that if this bylaw were to pass and we were updating a zoning bylaw, 50% of the units would be adaptable. And if you want more density, you'd have to do more than the 50%. And we'll consult with the development community to see what's reasonable, and yourselves, let us know. We're looking for input on that. Going back. Okay, so I think that was the last one. Now, so while we were doing this, we started in late 2022 with the housing study for adaptable, and mid-2023, this year, we learned from the province that they are actually looking to update the BC Building Code to require adaptable units. So that would be province-wide. And so what they're proposing is that in a 4-story apartment building, so any kind of apartment building that's 4 stories or greater, 100% of the units would require to be adaptable. And in smaller apartment or condo buildings, all first-floor units would have to be adaptable. And then they're also proposing modest changes for single-family dwellings and townhouses to make them more easily converted for accessibility as well. So I have learned from our building department, they feel that it's quite likely that the province will make these changes to the code, and then they would be in place 1st of January. So in which case, it often happens if several municipalities are doing an initiative, then suddenly the province is like, oh, maybe this is a good idea, we should require it for all municipalities. So we kind of, City of Nanaimo kind of got caught in that, and looks like the province may be proceeding anyways. However, we thought we'd continue with the project, we were that far along, just in case there's a hiccup at the provincial level, then council may have the option to put in the requirements that we're proposing here, so.
Tammy?
Are these, a lot of them sound like rentals? Like when you say like so much like an apartment unit that has so many units in it, are a lot of them rentals?
Well, in 2022, we actually saw quite a lot of purpose-built rental buildings, 4 and 5 stories being constructed, but they don't have to be, right? They could be ownership.
It'd be for all.
Yeah.
So the grants that are available for adapting your house, you have to own I think you have to be like a homeowner in order to do that. So there's a couple of issues with the people that rent, and then there's also these issues with First Nations that they don't own the property, but the tribe owns the property, or the First Nations.
Canada does sometimes.
Yeah. So we're running into
Depends on the
difficulty
type of house.
finding those grants.
Good feedback.
Okay.
I have Bay and then Jocelyn.
Yeah, about those grants, even if you did get a grant and a rental, I noticed there's something about a city grant program for it. In the details there, landlords can be very troublesome in not allowing you to install things like a grab bar even. So if there's anything that can be done to sort of put pressure on them to be more accommodating if stuff is needing to be done.
Yeah.
Okay, I have Jocelyn and Nicole.
Speaking to the grant question, it used to be called HAFI, it's now called RAHA, Rebate for Accessible Home Adaptations, and it's offered through BC Housing. And it is available to tenants, but as was just said, that depends on buy-in from the landlord, which I have been told that you could go all the way to the BC Human Rights Tribunal if you got a no, but it's a very blunt instrument for a very difficult situation. And my concern about, I'm torn about adaptable housing because I have a big family and I lived in Vancouver and couldn't visit a lot of them because they lived in very inaccessible forms of housing, townhouses and that sort of thing. And I also think that very little of it ever does get adapted because it's so expensive to do as an individual versus using those density bonuses to encourage more accessible housing so that adaptations are not needed, because we are still in a deficit of accessible housing and will be for a long, long time. And so there's a bit of adaptability that, in my personal opinion, is passing the cost along to the individual when there are some common accessibility features that benefit everybody. I'm not talking about like accessible units having like overhead patient hoists in every unit. We're talking about wider doors and bigger turning radiuses in bathrooms, basically. So anyway, I support any movement toward more accessibility, whether it's down the road for the people who can afford it. But I kind of worry about the contradiction between the type of housing that is likely to meet this and the type of housing that would be of tenants that would be able to afford to adapt it, especially seniors. And so I don't know, it's just my 10 cents, but I think we should participate in it, and I applaud you for doing the work, but I'd love to see more like 10, 15, 20% of all new developments in Nanaimo with accessible units, you know?
Okay, we have Nicole and then John.
I think Jocelyn just sort of summarized what I had to say. I guess the adaptable, I don't know the criteria of it, but even in like BC housing units, we've had problems from landlords approving things to be installed. And working with children, those families, they've sometimes waited a very long time to get a unit, period. So then to have to either move so that they can just put in something as simple as having a main floor bathroom. So I saw on the previous set of slides the goal of increasing apartments and townhouses and decreasing single family. I see where densification helps. But if that densification means smaller units with like only a main floor powder room, it's not even like, it doesn't work long term because these families end up having to move to find something, if they can even find something. So I think the smaller units, especially townhouses, create actual barriers rather than
designs.
Yeah.
Okay, we have John, then Wendy, and then Babe.
Today, the major problem with housing is cost. By adding all these things, every time you add something to the construction of a house or home, it adds to the price excessively, and it's getting out of line. Is there any concern that they're pricing it out of the market? Are they taking that into consideration?
Well, I can't speak for the province, but I know when the city initiated this project, one of the first things we did was to hire an economist to do that analysis. And they did the analysis for adaptable and family friendly, which I'll speak to next at the same time, just because we know that's what we'll hear from the development community. And so we want to find a way to do this so that will be successful. And what we learned from that study was that creating an adaptable unit, if the developer knows at the outset that they have to do 40% or 100% adaptable units, the costs actually aren't that much more because it's a wider doorway, so you're still building a doorway, it's just wider. Maneuvering room at dwelling unit entries and corridors, so you're still building corridors. I think there's a little bit more space for each unit, so maybe there's a cost there, but reinforcement of walls for grad bars, okay, that might be a little bit of an extra cost, but not excessive. Accessible door handles, switches, and outlets. So you're still doing switches and outlets and door handles, it's just they need to be accessible, so that's a change. So really what we learned from the economists is that it's not a huge cost to create a basic adaptable unit standard in accordance with the BC Building Code, particularly if they know that at the outset and can plan for that as part of their project performance.
What would cost more, John, is an accessible one? Because that would mean if you've got a townhome, you're going to need an elevator for 3, because that's what I hear from most people. Most people can't go into townhomes, even if they're adaptable, because we're building 3-story townhomes, not single level, which is what a lot of adaptable people need. So, but that's where your issue comes in, and the cost really right now is the land more than the house. The land costs are incredible.
You go to some of the like wider doors, you've got an excessive amount of cost to go especially wider door, and all those things. They double the price of all those things basically.
Well, that's true. I heard that too.
We are consulting with the development community, so that's a meeting we have next week. So it'll be a similar set of presentations, but to the development community.
I have Wendy. then
I
Bay,
just-
and then Sean.
Okay, I just want to follow up on Nicole's thing. When a family moves into a condo or a house, they don't plan on having a child with a diverse ability. So that makes a huge difference. You know, you have your one child and the next one comes along and it has a diverse ability, and you've got the right amount of housing, you know, you've got the 3 bedrooms or whatever, but it's not accessible, you know.
Good point. Bay?
Yeah, I was gonna ask about you're talking about applying this to 50% of new units. Was that just purpose-built rental multiplexes? Or are you talking about all new units, all new housing?
What's proposed is any development with 10 or more units on a parcel. And part of that was consultation with the building inspectors too, was when you have a project that's 10 or less units, it tends to be more of an infill site where, you know, you might have a steep slope, or accommodating the features of accessibility can be really challenging, and may, you know, inhibit infill then, you know?
Yeah.
So as a balance, what's being proposed is for all multifamily developments that are 10 or more units, because then you have a price point where they can accommodate those extra features, wider doorways, or, you know, all those things.
The problem is that infill housing, those secondary suites, those basement suites, that's some of the most accessible in terms of affordability housing there is. So if we're saying, those guys don't have to, they're building a new coach house or something in the backyard, but they don't have to meet any of these accessibility standards, but they're renting it for, you know, $1,200 a month or something. It's
good feedback, and from my understanding now, the most likely scenario is that the BC Building Code will be what actually happens. And in that case, they are proposing, I'm not sure for secondary suites.
No.
Nothing for secondary suites, but for single family dwellings and townhouses, some requirements will be added for accessibility, so.
We have Sean?
Yeah, just a question about adaptable. So, I mean, there's the language of adaptable design, which seems to me, at least in part, includes the ability to change something that's already been built. So you move into a place and it has something and it's just been purpose-built so that you can make modifications to it later. And then some of the things that we seem to be talking about are what I would call universal design, which is just if you always build all of your doorways a certain width, then everybody can move through them regardless of their level of ability. And so I wonder if there's value in sort of, because I'm hearing some concerns, and I think they're valid, about the capacity to shift things down the road if landlords aren't particularly amenable to it, versus if, as a group, we identify what things are important in terms of universal design to make recommendations to new developments. Those are things that you just build in the beginning. So whether it's a rental, whether it's a purpose-built ownership, whatever it is, that those things are built into it. I have seen the language of universal design coming up in some of these. I know there are some recommendations from the CMHC around universal design in owned houses and in rental units. So I wonder if that's, just questions about that, and whether there's thought about maybe shifting away if the BC Building Code is going to require it anyway, and we're already sort of moving forward with trying to increase access, if there's value in sort of shifting to think about what universal design standards would be good to look at for new developments.
Certainly, definitely looking for your feedback on it, and like I say, particularly for the full month of September, we are, because I know there's a lot, and Caleb's going to be presenting some more, so it's a lot to process. So we do have the website, so feel free to take a look through that, and
maybe we could get
follow up
the survey sent out to the committee members so they could do it.
Or the link to where they can
get
it. And just on that, Chair, and you said there is a recommendation.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up.
But with this recommendation, there's still the opportunity to provide that feedback through the whole month of September, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
So we do have a recommendation, and I'm cognizant of the time. Is there somebody willing to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Eastmer, seconded by Tanya. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, motion carries. Okay, we'll go to increasing family-friendly housing, please.
So this project is similar in that we were tasked with looking at ways to increase family-friendly housing in the city. And through the housing needs research, which was running parallel, we did, as Kasia mentioned, we did learn that, in fact, based on our housing needs assessment, there actually is enough family-friendly units. So when we define family-friendly, I think that's the next slide. Okay, so what we mean by family-friendly housing is a unit with 2 or more bedrooms and supports a household with more than 2 people. So, so in fact, what we learned through that housing needs analysis was that there is enough family-friendly housing, and that's partly because in Nanaimo we still have quite a lot of single-family homes. So when we talked to planners in the Lower Mainland, they actually said, well, they actually don't have enough. Even if it's expensive, they still don't have enough. Whereas in Nanaimo, we do have a lot of single-family homes, of course, with 3 or more bedrooms. It's just they're not attainable anymore, right? So then really the issue is, and I'm probably speaking to the next slide already, is that that we need more attainable family-friendly units. So part of this analysis was how do we do that, and I know that even renting a townhouse or a 3-bedroom or 2-bedroom apartment still is out of the range for many families, but at least it's, maybe that's something we can at least do to diversify the housing stock of family-friendly housing. And so,
wrong direction.
Thank you. I'm so sorry. Okay. And so the economist who did the work for Adoptable also took a look at what other municipalities are doing for family-friendly. And the city of New Westminster was actually won an award. They adopted their bylaw for family-friendly housing in 2016, and they found that it's been quite successful. And we're not a lot of municipalities actually that were requiring family-friendly housing in their multi-unit developments, so we didn't have a lot to draw from. So New West seemed to be the best model. And so what we're proposing is that for zones where multi-unit development is already permitted use, a minimum of 30% of the units must be 2+ bedrooms and 10% must be 3+ bedrooms. And so we do recognize, so we kind of looked at, in 2022, we had quite a few multifamily units being constructed. It was one of our biggest years, and you see it around the city, the 4- and 5-story buildings that were constructed in 2022. So if we had required this at that time, we would have increased family-friendly units in multifamily buildings by about 17 units, which isn't a lot. So we recognize that it's a gentle increase, but we are, I think it's progress. And Caleb's going to speak to other ways we're promoting infill and secondary suites. There's other things we're doing, but this is one proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw. And here we go. And so also, as I mentioned, when there's a multi-unit development permitted, we do allow for a density bonus when certain amenities are provided. And so we're proposing that if the family-friendly units are near a school, within 400 meters of a school, and are ground-oriented, that would be, you could receive a density bonus in that situation. And through the city plan research, we did learn that we need family-friendly units near schools, and that through ground-oriented family-friendly units are permitted rather than on the 3rd story. Yeah. And so another proposal, so what we heard from the development community, one barrier is when they're doing underground parking, which can be very expensive, and we're requiring 3 or 2-bedroom units, then they're needing more parking spaces. And when they have to do underground parking, that can be quite cost-prohibitive. So we do have a policy for consideration of parking variances. So we're thinking, proposing that maybe to add to that, if underground parking is part of the building and they're doing quite a few 2 and 3 bedroom units, maybe we can consider parking variance. Parking can be an issue in the city, so not everyone may support that, but we're looking for feedback on that idea. Yeah. So I think that's all we had for the family friendly. Yeah, any questions?
Bay and then Nicole.
Mentioning about the ground floor preference for families as a renter who's raised their kids. There's a few things that could totally change that. Elevator access and subfloor insulation. Because your child stomping and having a tantrum will get you evicted. So that's the biggest reason where, oh no, I don't want to be on an upper floor because somebody's going to complain.
Nicole and Sean?
Just on the parking thing, is there any way to tie, like the 3 bedrooms being used for a family is very different than 3 students choosing to be
3 cars.
to like, cohabitating and all going to a job and driving to VIU. Like, I think 3 bedrooms in my neighborhood are rarely families, unfortunately, and that's an attainability issue. But I can see the logic in reducing if they are truly family units. But if they're not family units, you just create a different problem.
Exactly. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm in support of creating options for families to move to Nanaimo and having units that are flexible in size. I think one of the uses that doesn't get considered is that we have an aging population that's going to require live-in care where maybe residential facilities or those sorts of things aren't suitable. We have a significant number of people with disabilities who are currently living at home because the rental options just aren't available. So larger units where it's supported for live-in care as possible. So I would be interested, I mean, if the number of 30% makes sense for families, I would actually be interested in seeing, in sort of reframing that narrative away from like just away from family friendly to whatever is inclusive of people who require live-in caregivers. And even seeing if that number might go higher, because I do think that's an increasing need, and there's just not enough units for people who require that level of live-in support.
Well, I know for me, parking's a big issue.
Yeah.
I never vote for parking variances. One of the big issues is right now there's human rights, and it's actually gone to the Supreme Court of BC, or not BC, Manitoba, where there was not enough parking supplied. And the courts ruled in favor, so it's been appealed by the city, so we'll see what happens because of the fact, again, it goes to people with accessibility issues. If you don't have parking for them, they can't live there. Because if you have a wheelchair, you can't wheel, 5 blocks where you're gonna find parking. The other problem is I just look in Montreal when the little 12-year-old got shot to death over a parking spot, right? People are really big on parking. I was just up on between Dodds and Laceport. You can't drive on that street. An ambulance can't get down it, neither can a fire department because we give too many variances. Changed. So we have to really look at that carefully because there's other studies that will show if you give somebody in poverty a vehicle, it will take them out of poverty. So there's a lot of studies towards it because they get better options for jobs. They don't have to worry about daycare as much because our transit system is not good. It will take a person an extra 3 hours to use transit if they have to drop kids at daycare, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. So these are things we have to think about. And you know what? I'm sorry, but developers make a hell of a lot of money. And you hear, and I just did research on it, it's anywhere from 20 to 50,000, depends on where you read and who you read for the extra costs. But in the big picture, when you're gonna have neighbors up in arms and the police costs and the bylaw costs to be going all the time, it doesn't take long to add up. So obviously I'm voting against this because I don't believe in the variance, but it's me. Babe?
About the building the family-friendly housing, and there was a lot about zoning, it got a little complex, but have you considered transit corridors? Working with transit to find areas where, you are zoning for it.
The RDN is responsible for transit, not the city.
Well, yeah, but is there any kind of relationship there that, we could come to some sort of agreements about well, this is an area where transit tends to go through, and we should build more affordable housing in this area to make it more accessible, because there are a lot of disabled people who can't drive, right, or can't even afford to drive.
Sure. And a lot of them have carrieds coming too, right, so they need parking. Mr. Sims?
Thanks, Chair. I think this is a really good question. I'm Bill Sims, I'm the General Manager of Engineering Public Works, just as an introduction. But I think this is exactly a really good point, and part of what's covered by city plan. So now the focus is on the various nodes across the city, or urban neighborhoods we would call them. But connecting those various neighborhoods are corridors, which will be where the frequent bus or the rapid transit systems are in place. So there's having an additional density adjacent to those corridors where there's transit is exactly the point. So to try and get reliance on the car reduced, or reliance on parking spaces reduced. That's the overall goal. It's a shift in land use, and that's enshrined now in city plan.
Richard?
I would say that that area that you mentioned, the road, I know the exact road specifically too, and it's been a contentious issue because
Richard, it's hard to hear you. Can you get closer to the mic?
Can you hear me better now?
No.
Oh. Give me a quick sec. I apologize.
I think it's the mic that he needs to like lift it up that thing maybe.
Do you have a mic in your headset, Richard?
Yeah.
There,
is this
good
better?
now. That's good.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So the area that you were kind of mentioning before about near Dodd's Furniture and that area has been having issues with parking for the longest time, and it's gotten so bad that there are actually people living out of their vehicles in that part of town, just because rent is so inaccessible in that area. And so when we're talking about accessible parking, it's a pretty bad situation for those people. And then on top of that, the parking in the area around that surrounding area is only going to be getting worse, with multiple apartment complexes that are being put up with not very much parking additionally there. And with that comes lack of accessible parking. Even at my apartment complex, I've spoken to a lot of residents in the area that have either mobility impairments or vision impairment, and they are having troubles with navigation and being able to find accessible parking. So it's been a significant problem in the north end of town.
Yeah, and also I think there they actually charge for parking too, which makes it more difficult. Ms. Curry?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to add that just from a personal experience. My son and his partner were living with me, and they had to go out on their own because we had a house fire. So they live in those complexes right there, and it's $75 for parking and $2,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, and which is really small. But that's the other thing. So there is parking available in the complexes, but they're expensive for when you're already paying that much money for a one-bedroom plus, everything else. So he does pay, because I told him he'd get ticketed on that street because I know it's an issue. But that's the other thing I think in this conversation is the affordability of parking that is available is an issue, which is why people head to the streets as well. So they head to the streets to not pay the $75 that the building is charging for parking. So
But yet that's the direction we're going because we want people with cars to pay for their parking. So it's a mixed bag, but big.
Something I noticed, I live on Rosehill Street, is there's many empty driveways. My parking lot is often empty. It's $30 a month from the landlord. They just have that fee now. So people will park on the street, and it seems to me like almost half the road gets taken up by car widths when the driveways right next to the car are empty.
So it's interesting. Okay, seeing no further questions, there is a recommendation if somebody would like to make it. No? You don't have to if you're not comfortable with it.
No, is this, wait, make sure I'm reading the right one we're talking about the.
New parking variance criteria to create more family-friendly housing in Nanaimo. So moved by Tanya, seconder.
Yeah, I will move it.
Hillary, all in favor?
Sorry, I'm just curious, are we all three of them or
We're doing
just one?
number one right now, C1. Recommendation that the advisory committee on accessibility and inclusiveness recommend that council support the proposed amendments to the City of Nanaimo zoning bylaw. The new parking variance criteria to create more family-friendly housing in Nanaimo is outlined in the 2023 September 6 report titled Increasing Family-Friendly Housing in Nanaimo.
Is this page 69?
No, it's on the bottom of my first
Bottom of
page.
page 2.
Bottom of page 2. Under C, it's C1.
7C1.
So I see, but
First,
this,
hang on just a second. We don't have a seconder yet, or did we have a seconder?
Yes,
yeah.
Okay, so discussion, Nicole?
So that is 3 recommendations, though, that, this recommendation, the 3 amendments. I'm sorry, I'm flipping between page
No, it's just one.
63, 64,
We
and
voted on the other two.
We've already voted on the first one. So now we're just voting only on that the advisory committee on accessibility and inclusiveness recommended council support the proposed amendments to city zoning bylaw and a new parking variance criteria. So we're just voting on that. Sean?
So this is that we can't just support, as part of this, we can't just support the new family friendly, it's with the parking
You
variance.
can make an amendment to remove that if
Okay.
you want. That's
Yeah.
I'd be interested in making an amendment to remove the parking variance and just support the family friendly.
So we have I'll second that.
I will second.
Thank you. So we're all, okay, so the new motion will read that the advisory committee on accessibility includes recommended council support the proposed amendments to the City of Nanaimo zoning bylaw to create more family-friendly housing in Nanaimo as outlined in the 2023 September 6 report entitled Increasing Family Housingness.
So that's the amendment. It's been moved and seconded, so that's what you're voting on right now.
So it would remove the new parking variance.
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion, further discussion? Seeing none, call the question, all in favor of the new motion? Any opposed? Seeing Councillor Eastmer and Tanya opposed, rest are in favor?
And then now the main motion
Now
is.
we'll go to the main motion as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? See, Councillor Eastmer opposed. Motion carries.
Richard's hand's up, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's all right. Hold over, Richard, your hand. You gotta remove your hand is a holdover. No, I need to hold it. I can tell because he'll vote with this. Okay, D, infill housing, Mr. Horn.
Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Horn. I'm in the current planning section. So the other planning department that's right next to Lisa's group. So what we're looking at now, and I'll go through this pretty quickly here, is just the last couple pieces of the kind of the increasing housing options that we're talking about that we have direction from council to explore this month. And so this is the infill housing and secondary suite regulations. So the first thing we're just going to look at here is the size and the number of suites. Currently, suites are only permitted up to 2 bedrooms and 90 square meters, so about 950 square feet. And that used to be limited by the building code. We are proposing to increase the size of secondary suites to up to 100 square meters and permit 3 bedrooms. We are also discussing having up to 2 suites on a property. That would be 1 attached suite, such as a basement suite, and 1 detached suite, which is what we commonly call a carriage house. We do allow carriage houses, of course, on some lots in the city presently, but you can't currently have a carriage house and a basement suite. So we are suggesting that there are some lots, some of the larger lots, that could be eligible to have both. And this is just kind of showing a cross-section of a house with a basement suite as well as a detached suite. I was talking about having lots that are permitted to have a detached suite currently. We're also just kind of making, suggesting some technical amendments here to allow carriage houses, the detached suites on smaller lots. And there's just some images of a detached suite, and this one on the left is probably called a carriage house because it also does include the garage as part of the same building as the suite. Some of the other changes we're proposing is to permit secondary suites in duplexes and townhouses. So again, this was a change in 2019 province-wide that now municipalities could choose to allow this. As of yet, we haven't. And we are seeing increasing demand for suites in duplexes and townhouses. So that just was a kind of a quick run through of our secondary suite regulations, and then there's the other piece of this is we're talking about our infill housing regulations. And maybe before I just talk about this, when a planner talks about infill housing, what we mean is housing going up into an existing neighborhood, as opposed to, for example, a greenfield development, which would be something going on out where there isn't previous development, and you have to bring in new services, new roads, new utilities. So when we talk about infill housing, we're talking about housing coming in where there already are services. So one of the pieces here we're looking at incentivizing are this triplexes and fourplexes. And we do have zoning in the city of Nanaimo. If you've ever bored and gone through the zoning bylaw, it's the R5 zone. It does allow triplexes and fourplexes. However, there aren't many properties that are pre-zoned for that use. So if someone wanted to build a fourplex, generally they would have to apply to go through a rezoning process, which can be quite lengthy and costly. So this is kind of just a snapshot, and I know you won't be able to see the entire map here. These properties in green are ones that we are exploring pre-zoning to allow triplexes and fourplexes. All of these lots are currently zoned either single family or duplex. So it would be an increase in the permitted density for these properties. So I think you were, as part of your information package, there was a link to get involved. If you go to that link, you'll also see there is an interactive map. So you can actually zoom in and see if your property is under that, is one of these properties or not. So you can kind of see a more interactive version. And this is, again, kind of just a bit more of the technical details. Right now, that zone I was talking about, the R5 zone, allows either 3 units or 4 units depending on certain criteria. So we're just talking about changing some of the criteria here to allow the 4 units on more of the properties where it is appropriate. And yeah, some of the other things that we're looking at changing are just the minimum lot sizes, as well as front yard setbacks for these infill zones. Depending on the area of town, what we find is the front yard setback often isn't utilized, or the front yard, and people want more space for the backyard. And so, anyone on council will tell you, we see a lot of development permits come through and people are varying the front yard setback. And oftentimes they are supported because we want to encourage more of that street presence, have maybe a veranda or steps and everything come closer to the street, and that way people can utilize more of the backyard. So that's one of the other changes we're looking at here, to try and help some of these properties facilitate infill housing. And again, here's just a little cross-section showing what that reduced front yard setback could look like. Just keeping in mind that there still is quite a large gap between where the front property line is to where the actual road might be, given our road standards. So this is just showing a typical urban local road standard and where the road would be from the property line. And this is showing quite a generous backyard. Yeah. I don't think anyone has one that quite that. So Under the same theme of looking at infill housing and encouraging kind of some of that gentle density in existing neighborhoods, we're looking at providing bonus density, so similar to what we were talking about previously, that idea of getting bonus density. Here though, where if you were to preserve or conserve an existing home. So this is based on a similar program in the City of Victoria. We are suggesting something similar here, that you could potentially get either one new dwelling unit and or more floor area ratio, which is just another way of measuring density in some of our old city zones. And that's just a photo of a existing home.
It's my old apartment in
There
the
you
top
go.
floor there.
Yeah.
My first apartment.
I won't ask how many units were in it, but it's a few, yeah.
But it was so affordable.
There you go. Great. Okay, and then the last one here is again just a relatively minor amendment to one of our other zones, which is our row house zone. And we just are intending to create a more flexible row house zone. Row houses are a bit unique, and the terminology, at least in Nanaimo, we distinguish between row house and townhouse in that a row house is on a fee simple lot. So that image on the right, that's an existing row house development. That isn't a strata. Everyone owns their property outright. The only, in lieu of strata, all they have is a common agreement for the common party wall with their neighbor on either side. So we're looking at expanding that zone and creating more flexibility to allow either row houses or townhouses, and creating kind of that missing middle almost between your townhouse style and your apartment style. So yeah, so that's everything for infill housing and secondary suites. Happy to take any questions.
John and Wendy?
I think this is even worse for the parking. Like we have on our street, there's a rental house. It's a 3-bedroom house. There are 5 cars there. If you're going to put a suite in or anything else, you should have to guarantee off-street parking. We want to eliminate lawns, pave them and put in parking. But all you're doing here is pushing a lot more people out on the street.
Wendy?
So you're talking about having a carriage house or whatever, do they have to have a separate driveway or can they have the same driveway?
So yeah, that's a good question, and it's something we're looking at. Currently, they could have the same driveway, but they would have to have a separate designated parking space. And I just wanted to clarify, through any of these, we're not proposing to decrease any of the parking requirements. So anytime you provide an additional suite, you would be expected to provide additional parking for that suite. So if you were looking at one of the earlier slides when we talked about the types of properties that could have a basement suite and a detached suite, we said it has to be 800 square meters in area and have a lot frontage width of 15 meters, and that's specifically to ensure that we could have that space for a driveway to come up the side of the house and serve the carriage house if necessary.
Okay, thanks.
Babe? Or sorry, Nicole.
Do you have any estimation of how many of these would be possible in the existing city lots? Like, to me, when you describe that you have to have space up the side of the house to have a driveway, that's very few homes. Or is it?
It's surprisingly actually a lot of our single family homes that could be eligible. The typical Hudson Bay lot was about 808 square meters, so that any of those lots would be eligible, assuming they still have the 15-meter frontage, which is in fact our minimum width for single family lots if it was a recent subdivision. So it is surprisingly a high number. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head though, that could be eligible for having up to 2 suites.
I have a question on this because when they did this in Langley, it actually really pushed the cost of housing up by 300,000 to 400,000. Because instead of your house being worth $1 million, because you could subdivide it, they were now selling for 1.5, 1.6. So I think that's something we need to look at very closely, because what it does is because now you can create 2 houses instead of 1. So instead of a house being worth 800,000, they found there the houses were jumping almost to 1.5, 1.6. So it really increased the cost of housing. Because then that person would build 2 and sell it for 1.5 on each, but to get it because people are paying for the land, they're not paying for the house. So it's something to look at and really do research, because I know Langley is really readdressing that.
For sure. Just to clarify, when we're talking about the suites, like a carriage house, our current bylaw would not permit the stratification or separate sale of that unit. It would either have to be a rental or utilized by that family if they want like an in-law suite. So you're right, it could potentially increase the value of the lot, but then you could also have perhaps more rentals available, and then the rentals, in theory, could go down. But no, it's a fair point.
Hillary?
Yeah, I think I've been hearing from people who have a secondary suite in their house but lots of room in their backyard, and like as a potential mortgage helper and to be able to offer more affordable housing options for people, I have heard a lot of feedback from people anecdotally who are talking to me about it, who do want to see this increase in secondary suites because it just gives us a wider range of housing options.
Jocelyn? And then I'll call the question because we're almost out of time.
I just have a question about what you define a townhouse as. In my experience in Vancouver, they had something called a stacked townhouse, I think, which was where the suites were horizontal. Like there would essentially be ground level suites with another one above, like a tiny little condo building kind of. Is that affected by any of these proposed changes? Because it would be a much more wheelchair accessible, I should say, form of density than the standard townhome, like vertical 3-story, lots of stairs arrangement.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And currently, no, there isn't a distinction for that type of townhouse unit. What we are talking about is putting in a requirement for a ground-oriented front entry for any townhouse unit. That could potentially still lead to the stacked townhouses. They aren't common in Nanaimo. I am only familiar with one that has been approved. In that case, the ground level unit, is in theory accessible, and then the units above would only be accessed by stairs, but that staircase would still have a ground level entry. But they're not common in Nanaimo. Typically our height restrictions would usually limit them from being stacked.
I see something you had a fast question.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the secondary, you were talking about increasing people so they can have a detached suite and an attached suite, which would then be 2. Would you consider making it so 50%, so one of them would have to be meeting that accessible standard, the basic?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, I'm not too familiar with the building code, so I don't know how it does apply to suites generally, but I think there's definitely opportunity to explore that.
Could we put that in the motion as Ms. Gurry is with consideration to exploring one of the suites be adaptable? Would that work?
Might be a secondary motion rather than adding it into this one, which hasn't been moved or seconded.
Yeah, I'm just going to call for it because I know we're short on time. So is there somebody that wants to move that recommendation? The recommendation being that the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness recommends that Council support the proposed infill housing and secondary suite regulations as outlined in the 2023 September 6th report titled Infill Housing and Secondary Suite Regulations. Mover, Councillor Eastmer, seconded by Sean. Any questions? Call the question, all in favor?
Voting on all of everything that you presented.
Yeah, that's just one motion. Okay. Do you have an issue that you want to remove something? Because that's fine. If you got a concern, please raise it because it's important that we hear.
I'm not sure if Jocelyn has her hand up from previously still. No,
I'm just waiting to see
Yeah, no, it's just, it's a lot, right? Mm-hmm. All of those things, right? This is what we're proposing.
Yeah, now it's going to mention to the committee, this is a lot, we don't normally do this.
Okay.
Bring this much to you, and this is a lot, so we won't.
Yeah, we're not going to get to.
This is a lot of material.
We'll try and get to
and we'll try to.
Okay.
If you're not comfortable doing it now, there's no reason why we can't.
Yep,
Can we
delay
just
some things.
delay it to the next meeting? If you're not comfortable, if you want to look at it further, that's fine too.
That and as well, this is just a recommendation to council. So council ultimately gets to discuss this, debate this, and take the responsibility for it ultimately. So it's not on your heads. If you approve this, you're just recommending council support it. Yeah, you're recommending council support it. that's what you're doing.
So, but I'm just concerned that if there's some concerns that people
100%.
don't feel that have been addressed, I
I
would
feel like
be more,
it's too many.
then I would feel more comfortable that, could we defer this? Would you guys be more comfortable deferring this to the next meeting? Okay, so if I could have a motion to defer. And
Okay,
Nicole, a
then
motion to defer?
When's the next meeting?
We'll have one a special one in October, and then we have
Yeah,
the
because
regular one
we
in
don't
November.
have enough time. Motion to defer is by Nicole, seconded by Tammy. All in favor to defer the motion to the next meeting? Any opposed? Seeing none opposed, we'll go to the next meeting on that. So what I'll ask, if you do have questions beforehand, maybe if you send them out so that they know that then they can address them right away instead of having maybe to come back, so it's always simpler. And I'm gonna go next to the
That's great.
Gonna go to the Inclusive Bus Stop Pilot Project, and I don't think we're gonna get to new business. Because we've got 5 minutes, Mr. Sims.
Right, Bill Sims, General Manager of Engineering Public Works. So part of our portfolio is supporting the regional district in transit. I'm gonna ask Jamie Rose, our Manager of Transportation, who works quite intimately with BC Transit and Regional District of the Nanaimo Transit drivers. So we're the road authority, and we sort of are responsible for the hard infrastructure, and the regional district is responsible for the transit piece. So we we work together to make sure that, you know, it makes sense. And one of the things when I was mentioning city plan before, not only city plan is our accessibility inclusiveness plan, but it's also our mobility plan for transit, and we're supporting the regional district that way. So the previous iteration of this committee have put forward a motion to make transit stops more accessible. So that's what we've been working away at, and Jamie's going to tell you a little bit about the work that
Mr.
he's
Rose,
doing.
please.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Good afternoon. Thanks very much for having me. This is an information report. There's no motion attached to it, and so this is an update sharing with the committee what has taken place in the last few years with respect to inclusivity around transit stops. I'm sure many of you are aware of some of the discussions that have gone on with the Human Rights Tribunal down in Victoria, and what came from that with the sort of commingling of cycling facilities and transit stops. And so, as Mr. Sims referenced, City Plan does have this multifaceted perspective on mobility for the city, and how we work with the RDN. And what we've actually been involved in over the last 6 months to a year is a partnership project with many road authorities across the province, led primarily by the province and TransLink, to review the discussions that took place down in Victoria with the floating bus stops and ways to amend different agencies' design guidelines and figure out a way to ensure that they meet the needs of all users. And so with that, we've had some direction from the steering committee of that project, and have been invited to participate in the pilot project to review some of our locations and make some changes through the lens of the recommendations. And so the 2 locations we're putting forward are on Front Street. One location's on Front Street and one location's on Owen Road. In the design pattern, the board package, there are some notes on what some of the changes include, and we're planning to move that forward this fall. And as part of the entire process, we will be coming back to the committee to seek some feedback and potentially do some field trips. Richard and Jocelyn both participated last year in some reviews we did, and so hopefully we can springboard off that and get some insight. And then all of this information will be brought forward to the provincial project and shared. And ideally, that will then result in some updates to the BC Active Transportation Design Guidelines, our transportation design standards, and basically ensure that everybody can navigate and use the facilities that we build. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Nicole, and then, yeah, okay, Nicole.
Is somewhere to sit part of that review. I noticed like benches are being taken out in many places, including outside the hospital where people may not have the endurance to stand and wait for a bus. Even though they may not physically be unable to stand, they cannot stand for that length of time. So I'm just wondering if a place to sit is part of that review.
I can answer that.
I think I know why they're being taken out, but it creates an
They're very
accessibility
dangerous.
issue.
So the location of benches is part of this review. Where and how many benches and shelters is a different conversation. So this is a very sort of focused look at how we can ensure that people can navigate through these facilities.
Sunday?
Yeah, I'm wondering if I could connect with you folks. We don't have time to talk about all the things, the suggestions I have. Is it possible to connect with you and provide more feedback from a transit user perspective?
Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the next steps will be to, I'm going to say, probably not the right terminology, but strike a subcommittee to get feedback as part of this process. So that's a perfect opportunity.
Sean?
And so is the purpose of the pilot project to develop and test a baseline of accessibility for all stops in Nanaimo? I mean, obviously within degrees, like some stops will be more accessible depending on the number of people that go there and whether they're in a hub. But then there are stops like the one near my house on Fitzwilliam Street, which is just a pole and some dirt. So like there's a spectrum of baseline accessibility, and is this kind of part of then leading to looking at all stops and making sure that there's baseline access? Because it's great to get on a bus stop that's super accessible, but if you get off one that's a dirt and pole, then that's not.
So this pilot project is absolutely focused on bus stops that are adjacent cycling facilities.
Right.
Accessibility for bus stops in a broad spectrum perspective was something we discussed previously, and we are continuing to sort of tinker and refine our overall designs for them.
What percentage roughly, if you had to guess, of the bus stops in Nanaimo are adjacent to cycling facilities?
Oh, percentage wise?
Yeah.
5, maybe less.
Okay.
All right, so I think we're out of time. So Ms. Curry, we've got 4 things left. Could they be put over to next meeting as agenda items?
Yes,
So we could ask then that Ms. Hall would do a discussion on inclusive housing seminar. She could provide an update. That would be one. The correspondence on the stable parking permit holders. That was just more for information. It's something that we have to look at from a council perspective, so I don't think that really needs to come forward again. It was just there so you guys are aware that there's an issue with that. And the Accessibility Canada Act, I think I gotta look at that more.
Yeah, I had a brief look at that, Chair, and any recommendations regarding like the hiring and stuff that they're speaking of would need further information from HR and our agreements.
So perhaps maybe what we should do, if he's interested, I could invite Mr. Heskett to come as a delegation. And we could go that route instead. I think that might make more sense if people are, so we'll do that. I can get hold of him, Trevor can do that. Then the work plan, we could do that at the next meeting.
Well, we're actually hoping to get a special meeting for you on October. Just not to wait till November.
Yes.
So you'll get a
Is everybody okay with that?
request.
So we have some potential dates, and there's one that is highlighted here, so I'm thinking that it's the best suggested one that my staff have. And that would be Wednesday, October 11th, from 4 to 6. And at that meeting, we could do the work plan, right, Richard? Is that,
Yes,
yeah.
the work plan would be the primary. We could put some of these other ones on there, but we
Yeah.
want to really spend a lot of time on the work.
So we should leave the agenda to really be focusing
If
on
we could
the
do the work
plan
plan and then
and
just
also-
maybe Wendy's update, I think that'd be important to get that. Feedback on Mafio, if you just want to email it maybe, and then email to all the committee, and then we can always bring that up if there's more questions, is that okay? Okay.
Yeah, I had a question about sort of second thing about the infill houses. if that's gonna get where that.
We'll do that
topic
at,
will
not
be
at that
raised.
meeting, the next one after, I think.
In November.
Because we really wanna focus on our work plan, because we need to know where we're gonna go for the next 3 years. So, John?
Just a quick question. First meeting, I received the online, the minutes or the agenda and everything else. And I like to keep track, so I printed it all off, figuring so that I have it for the future. It came this week, it's, I don't have to print off the parts I want. I'll get, we handed a hard copy and there's no hard copy. So which is it gonna be? Are we gonna get a hard copy
If
of
you
these
want a hard
or
copy,
not?
you just have to ask. So who wants hard copies of the agenda?
Yeah, because printing off 91
So John, you
pages,
want
and- yes.
So a hard copy for John. Anybody else? Sean, do you want a hard, Sean wants a hard copy? Everybody else is good? Fine, okay.
And they will be available at the meeting then, that's how we'll
Yeah.
get them to you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then also, yeah, I just really want to focus on the work plan because we really need to move forward. Richard? Holdover? That's a holdover. I can't hear you, Richard. No, still can't. Can't hear you. Unmute. You're still on mute.
Didn't work.
Still on mute.
There you
Here,
go.
try now. Nope. Okay. Just email us. All right, so are we okay, Ms. Curry? Anybody else before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn? Wendy, followed, seconded by Nicole, all in favor? Thank you, everyone.
And again, that is a lot of material from that.
No, and I just want to stress, it's really important to me that if you're not sure, please say, I want time, because this is really important work that you're doing. And if you just push it through and you're not sure, I don't like that, because it's really